Welcome back to the deep dive. We've spent weeks now deep inside the ruins of Stalingrad, charting that absolutely brutal close quarters fight.
Yeah, the infamous Rattenkrieg, the Rat War.
Exactly. And when we left off, things looked, well, incredibly bleak for the Soviet defenders. The German Sixth Army, Paulus's army, had pushed them back to just these tiny strips along the Volga. They held something like 90% of the city.
They really did. It's mid-November 1942. And from the German perspective, victory seemed so close. It felt like Soviet resistance just had to be crumbling.
But that very success, pushing so deep into the city, it created a huge problem they didn't quite see.
Overextension. A classic mistake, really. While all the elite German troops were focused on clearing those last pockets by the river, their flanks way out on the steppe were incredibly vulnerable.
Held by Allied troops, right? Romanians, Italian.
Exactly. Armies that the German high command had frankly neglected. Poorly equipped, stretched thin, and that fixation on the city, on Stalin's namesake, that's where the story pivots.
Yeah, this is where we get to the massive turnaround. So our mission today is to unpack that huge Soviet counteroffensive, how they trapped the entire Sixth Army, and really how this became the turning point of the war in Europe.
It's arguably one of the most dramatic reversals in military history. And you have to remember the context inside the city just before this happened. Conditions were just hellish.
We talked about frostbite, disease.
Typhus, dysentery, rife on both sides, ammunition low, just utter misery. But even then, the Soviets were already setting the stage for this incredible counterpunch, a masterclass in deception.
Operation Uranus, that was the code name.
That's the one. And this wasn't some hasty reaction. It was meticulously planned, mainly by Marshal Zhukov and Alexander Vasilevsky. They saw that just throwing more men into the city meat grinder was pointless.
They looked bigger, they saw the weak spot.
Precisely. The planning actually started back in September, believe it or not, while the city fighting was at its absolute fiercest. And secrecy was incredible. They gathered this colossal force, 18 infantry divisions.
Something like that, yeah. Plus tank brigades, mechanized units, hundreds of thousands of men.
All hidden out on the steppes, north and south of the city, aimed right at that weak link.
Which was the Don River line, held by the Allies.
Yeah, the Romanians, Italians, Hungarians, the Germans, frankly, were arrogant about it. They figured these sectors were critical, diverted all their best gear, their best anti-tank weapons into Stalingrad itself.
Leaving the flanks dangerously exposed.
Dangerously is an understatement. You had sectors where maybe 30 Romanian soldiers were expected to hold a couple of kilometers of front line. And critically, they had almost nothing to stop Soviet tanks. Maybe some old 37mm guns. Absolutely no match for the T-34s.
It sounds like a disaster waiting to happen.
And it did. November 19th, 1942. 7:33 a.m., the Soviets launched. Conditions were actually perfect for them.
Yeah.
Thick fog helped hide the advance, but the ground was frozen solid. Good for the tanks.
So where did the first blow land?
Against the Romanian Third Army, up in the north, near Kletskaya and Serafimovich. It started with this massive artillery barrage, just shattering everything, communications, morale.
Before the tanks even rolled.
Exactly. And when they did roll, the Romanians were just swamped, outnumbered 3-1 in men, maybe 10-1 in tanks. You stood no chance.
And the Soviets didn't get bogged down fighting them.
No, that wasn't the plan. Speed was everything. The 5th Tank Army just punched through, bypassed the Romanian positions, and drove west, deep into the rear. Open country, perfect for tanks.
The Southern Pincer?
The very next day, November 20th, slammed into the Romanian 4th Army Corps down south near Beketovka. Same idea. Speed, shock, bypass resistance. Classic double envelopment.
And it worked incredibly fast.
Breathtakingly fast. Just 4 days after the first attack started, November 23rd, the two pincers met at a town called Kalach.
Kalach, right. That was the key point.
Absolutely crucial. They captured the main bridge over the Don there, intact. And just like that, the ring snapped shut.
An entire German army plus parts of another encircled.
The scale is immense. The German Sixth Army, elements of the 4th Panzer Army, all their support troops. Roughly 330,000 Axis soldiers trapped. Gone from the map in less than a week.
And we should mention the Highways too, shouldn't we? The Soviet auxiliaries fighting with the Germans.
Yes, absolutely. Tens of thousands of them, maybe 40,000, maybe more. For a German soldier, capture was terrifying enough. For a Hiwi, trapped behind Soviet lines, capture meant almost certain death, or the Gulag. That added another layer of desperation inside what became known as the Kessel.
The cauldron. So the trap closes. What's the immediate reaction from the German command inside? Surely breakout.
Well, that's what you'd expect, right? Any competent commander would see the need to punch through immediately. before the Soviets solidify the ring.
And Paulus, the commander, he wanted to?
He did. He'd actually asked for permission to pull back even before Uranus hit, around November 10th. She saw the danger to his flanks. But now, trapped, he formally requested permission to attempt a breakout.
And Hitler said no.
Absolutely not. This is where ideology just completely trumped military reality. Hitler saw Stalingrad as this huge, symbolic prize. He issued a direct order. Stand fast, no withdrawal. No commander gives up a meter of ground without his personal consent.
That's paralyzing.
Utterly. And Paulus, well, he was fundamentally a meticulous staff officer. Obedient, he followed the order. Some historians argue his chief of staff, Schmidt, also argued against breakout, fearing chaos.
Right.
But ultimately, the Führer's order was ironclad.
So they're stuck, waiting for relief that might never come.
And the moment that decision is made, conditions inside the pocket just nosedive. They're forced out of their relatively secure city ruins onto the open, freezing steppe, digging trenches in frozen ground.
With winter hitting hard.
Brutally hard. Temperatures dropped to -30°C, -40 even. Frostbite became rampant. Men froze to death, literally standing guard. Disease spread like wildfire, dysentery, typhus, because there was no sanitation. Combat effectiveness just plummeted.
And supplies. How are they supposed to get food, ammo, fuel?
That's the next fatal error. They calculated they needed about 750 tons of supplies every single day just to keep fighting. Food, fuel, ammo. The decision came from Berlin. The Luftwaffe would supply them by air.
Hermann Goering's promise.
Goering personally assured Hitler the Air Force could do it. It was pure hubris, a catastrophic miscalculation.
So the Great Airlift, it didn't work.
It was a disaster, a logistical nightmare. To hit that 750-ton target, they needed hundreds of flights daily. The workhorse was the Ju-52 transport plane, carrying maybe 1.5 tons, if lucky.
Okay.
In reality, on a good day, they averaged maybe 105 tons.
105 out of 750 needed.
Yeah, less than 15%. It meant brutal rationing. Ammo often prioritized over fuel, fuel over food. The soldiers were starving almost immediately. Eating the Army's horses became standard.
God, that's grim. And the cost to the Luftwaffe itself.
Huge. They lost nearly 500 aircraft trying to fly into the pocket, including over 260 of those vital Ju-52s. That loss of transport capacity crippled them across the entire Eastern Front for the rest of the war. It was a massive blow.
And things got even worse, didn't they? With the airfields.
They did. Christmas Eve, December 24th. A Soviet tank raid captured Tatsinskaya, the main forward airfield they were using. A huge shock.
So they had to fly from further away.
Exactly. Bases like Morozovsk. Much longer flight times, meaning fewer sorties could even reach the pocket. The trickle of supplies slowed even further.
So the Army is trapped, freezing, starving, supplies are dwindling. Was there any hope of rescue from the outside?
There was one major attempt. Field Marshal von Manstein, one of Germany's best strategists, was tasked with breaking the siege. Operation Winter Storm.
Winter Storm, how did that go?
Manstein scraped together what forces he could, notably the LVA Panzer Corps with the 6th Panzer Division rushed from France. They attacked from the southwest near Kotelnikovo. But they had 160 kilometers of snow-covered steppe and fierce Soviet resistance to overcome.
A long way in those conditions?
Incredibly tough. Deep snow, blizzards, frozen ground-wrecking vehicles. But Manstein pushed hard. By December 18th, his spearheads were only about 48 kilometers. That's 30 miles from the edge of the pocket.
So close. Why didn't Paulus break out then? Meet them halfway. That was Operation Thunderclap.
That was the plan, Operation Thunderclap. But Paulus didn't launch it, and this is still debated intensely. He was still bound by Hitler's stand-fast order, for one.
Still no permission to break out.
None explicitly given. Plus, he cited critical fuel shortages. Remember the airlift prioritizing ammo? His tanks, he claimed, only had enough fuel for maybe 30 kilometers.
Not enough to reach Manstein. They'd be stranded in the open.
Precisely. It was a terrible choice. Disobey the Führer and risk a chaotic, underfueled breakout into the teeth of Soviet defenses, or obey and hope Manstein could somehow break through to him. He chose to obey and wait.
A fatal wait.
Because while Manstein was straining to reach Kaunas, the Soviets launched another offensive. The knockout blow, really. Operation Little Saturn.
Little Saturn. Where did that hit?
Not near Stalingrad. Hundreds of kilometers away, further west. It hit the Italian 8th Army on the Don River line, an area already weakened.
Widening the breach in the Axis front.
Exactly. And crucially, it threatened to cut off and encircle Manstein's entire army group Don, potentially trapping them against the Caucasus Mountains. A far bigger disaster even than Stalingrad.
So Manstein had to react to that threat.
He had no choice. He realized saving the Sixth Army now meant risking the loss of the entire southern wing of the Eastern Front. He had to pull back, abandon the relief attempt for Stalingrad, and shift forces to stop Little Saturn.
So Winter Storm is called off.
Called off. And with that, the last sliver of hope for the Sixth Army vanished. They were completely doomed. Alone, starving, freezing, waiting for the end.
Which couldn't be far off now.
No. The Soviets knew it too. In early January 7th, 1943, they sent envoys under a flag of truce. Generals Voronov and Rokossovsky offered formal surrender terms.
What were the terms?
Pretty standard, actually. Guaranteed safety for prisoners, medical care, food rations probably sounded like heaven to the starving Germans, and eventual repatriation after the war.
Did Paulus consider it?
He desperately wanted to. He radioed Hitler, pleading for permission to accept to save his remaining men.
And Hitler's response?
Predictably, furiously negative. Stand fast, fight the last bullet, and then to hammer the point home on January 30th.
The anniversary of him taking power.
Right. He promoted Paulus to General Field Marshal. The implication was crystal clear.
No German field marshal had ever surrendered.
Never. Hitler basically expected Paulus to commit suicide rather than be captured. Achieve eternity, as he put it.
But Paulus didn't, and the Soviets weren't waiting any longer.
No. They launched their final offensive to liquidate the pocket. Operation Koltsow the Ring, January 10th. It started with maybe the biggest artillery barrage of the war up to that point.
Thousands of guns.
Nearly 7,000 guns, mortars, rocket launchers, just pulverizing the shrinking German positions. It was described as an economy of force, offensive use, overwhelming firepower to crush rapidly towards the ruined city center. The real death knell, logistically, was losing the last airfields. Potomac fell around January 16th. Gumrak, the very last trip, around the 21st or 22nd.
Which meant?
No more supplies at all, not even the tiny amounts getting through. And crucially, no more evacuation of the wounded.
How many were trapped?
Estimates are maybe 40,000, 50,000 sick and wounded men left behind. Survivors described horrific scenes watching the last planes leave, sometimes carrying only staff officers, while wounded men screamed on the tarmac. Unimaginable.
Yet they still fought on.
In pockets, yes. Desperation, maybe loyalty, but also sheer terror of Soviet captivity drove them. But the end was piecemeal. Around January 28th, the pocket split into 3 parts.
And Paulus was in the southern one?
Yes. His final headquarters was in the basement of the GUM department store. Reports say it was unbelievably filthy, squalid, just total collapse. Soviet troops reached the entrance on January 31st.
The day after his promotion?
The very next day, Paulus was taken prisoner. He didn't formally surrender the whole army, but his capture effectively ended resistance in that sector.
What about the other pockets?
The northern pocket, under General Strecker, held out for 2 more days. Incredible, really. Strecker sent a final radio message on February 2nd. Famously, he omitted the usual Heil Hitler.
What did he say?
Long live Germany. A final, perhaps defiant, perhaps just exhausted sign-off, and then silence.
So it was over. How many prisoners did the Soviets take in the end?
About 91,000 men. Exhausted, starving, frostbitten, diseased remnants of a once mighty army, including 22 German generals.
Hitler must have been furious about Paulus surrendering.
Apoplectic. He reportedly raged that Paulus chose to go to Moscow rather than die like a field marshal should.
Stepping back then, the sheer scale of this, the legacy, the casualties are just mind-boggling.
They defy comprehension. It's consistently called the bloodiest battle of World War II, maybe in all history.
Yeah.
Soviet losses were well over 1 million killed, wounded, captured. Axis losses, estimates vary, but somewhere between 800,000 and maybe 1.5 million, counting the whole campaign.
And the material losses for Germany.
Irreplaceable. Thousands of tanks, guns, aircraft. But more importantly, the manpower. An entire army group, effectively. 24 divisions wiped out, many of them the best the Wehrmacht had.
And those 91,000 prisoners, what happened to them?
It's an incredibly tragic postscript. Already weakened, most died on brutal forced marches to POW camps deep in Russia, or in the camps themselves from disease and starvation. Typhus was rampant.
How many survived?
Only about 5,000 or 6,000 ever made it back to Germany. The last ones weren't repatriated until 1955, 10 years after the war ended.
So Stalingrad wasn't just a defeat, it was annihilation.
It was the greatest single disaster in German military history, full stop. Psychologically, the myth of the invincible Wehrmacht, the army that rolled over France, shattered, gone forever.
And the world recognized this at the time.
Immediately. Newspapers globally hailed it as the turning point. Churchill famously said it marked the end of the beginning. It was seen as the Verdun of the Eastern Front, a battle of attrition. Germany simply couldn't afford to lose, and did.
So the key impact was
The shift in strategic initiative. That's the absolute core takeaway. The Red Army proved it could plan and execute operations on a massive scale, like Uranus and Little Saturn. They gained immense confidence.
you cannot stop an army which has done Stalingrad.
Exactly. From Stalingrad onwards, the Soviets largely dictated the tempo on the Eastern Front. Germany was forced onto the defensive, reacting rather than acting. They never recovered the initiative they lost there. It truly was the turning point.
So this deep dive, from the street fighting through Uranus to the final surrender, it really cements Stalingrad's unique place in history, a symbol of total war, total commitment. That Soviet phrase sums it up. For us, there is no land beyond the Volga.
Absolutely. But that total commitment, fueled by ideology on both sides, it came at an almost unimaginable cost. The focus on the city because it was named Stalingrad seems to have driven the catastrophe far beyond military logic.
Which leaves us with that final, perhaps unsettling thought. When you look at the staggering human cost, the millions dead or ruined, the destruction of that army, how much did the purely symbolic value of the city's name and the resulting personal obsession of both Hitler and Stalin amplify this disaster, condemning so many to die for reasons that went beyond strategy, something to really ponder?